Tehran is warning Europe that by backing Trump's campaign against Iran, and by allowing US forces to use European facilities, the continent is sliding into the war rather than staying above it, even as the American president ramps up pressure on the new UK Prime Minister to join the fight. Iran's message that Europe is in the ranks of hostile states if it lets the US operate from Allied bases is a stark reminder that airfields, logistics hubs, and staging posts across NATO territory could be treated as legitimate targets if they directly support strikes on Iranian assets. By opening their infrastructure to Washington, Western governments risk expanding the Iran war beyond the Middle East and into Europe itself, turning what began as a Gulf-centered conflict into a wider confrontation that exposes European soil, civilians, and military installations to potential retaliation. Trump's bullying posture toward the new UK leader over Iran is now mirrored further east, as Bulgaria has also agreed to let the US use its base for war-related operations, signaling that American pressure and Iranian warnings are converging on NATO's southern and eastern flanks at the same time. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Gharibabadi has warned European governments not to back US military action against Iran, explicitly cautioning that they risk being drawn into the conflict if they allow Washington to operate from their soil. He stated that providing bases or territory to the US would make its allies aggressors as well, arguing that any state enabling American strikes becomes a legitimate party to the war and therefore a potential target for Iranian retaliation. Iran's warning was issued in a post on X after Gharibabadi met with 25 European envoys in Tehran, where he used the diplomatic gathering to deliver a direct message about the risks of supporting US operations. Gharibabadi said he had outlined Iran's view of what he called US criminal actions and recent war developments, framing American strikes and pressure campaigns as unlawful aggression under international law and the UN Charter. He claimed that Iran had inflicted a heavy defeat on its foes during the 40-day US-Israeli clash, portraying Tehran's missile and drone attacks on regional bases and assets as successful proof of Iran's ability to hit back. The deputy minister vowed that Iran will decisively defend its territory and national interests, stressing that any escalation will be met with further retaliation against the infrastructure and logistics used to wage war on Iran. Gharibabadi also argued that recent wars have brought no strategic gains for the United States, casting Washington's campaigns in the region as costly, destabilizing, and ultimately ineffective in shifting the strategic balance. He said only a small number of European states, such as Spain, had taken principled positions, praising those governments that refused to offer bases or explicit military support and criticizing the broader EU stance as hypocritical. These comments follow UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham's decision to continue allowing US use of British bases, effectively maintaining his predecessor Keir Starmer's policy of permitting certain American strikes to be launched from UK territory. Burnham has upheld Starmer's approach of letting US operations proceed from UK soil under defined conditions, a continuity that Iran reads as London aligning itself with US military action despite domestic unease. In parallel, Bulgaria's parliament has backed US use of Bezmer Airbase for operations linked to the Iran war, authorizing American aircraft and personnel to deploy from Bulgarian territory to support Middle East missions. The decision allows US military aircraft to operate from Bulgaria in the current war context, moving the NATO member closer to direct involvement and placing its infrastructure within the geographic arc of the conflict. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai has said this kind of cooperation makes Sofia complicit in aggression, arguing that by providing facilities to US forces, Bulgaria shares responsibility for unlawful attacks on a UN member state. Baghai further contended that Bulgaria knows US strikes on Iran violate the UN Charter and international law, insisting that states have a legal obligation not to let their territory or assets be used for invading other countries. New UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham has reportedly approved the continued use of British military bases by the United States, authorizing American forces to operate from UK soil for certain Iran-related missions described as defensive in nature. Burnham's decision explicitly allows US forces to use these bases for what London calls defensive strikes against Iran, signaling continuity with earlier policy rather than a sharp departure from the framework set under previous leadership. This shift was revealed after reports claimed Washington had pressured the new Prime Minister to stick with the line taken by Keir Starmer, ensuring that American access to key British facilities would not be interrupted by the change in government. According to those accounts, details of this US pressure campaign were outlined in a Bloomberg report dated July 21 and relayed by Iran International, which framed the episode as part of broader American efforts to lock in Allied support for the ongoing war. Trump and Burnham held their first phone call on July 20, shortly after Burnham entered office, using the conversation to set the tone for their relationship and to discuss how closely the UK would align itself with US strategy on Iran. Trump later characterized the discussion as very good and hailed what he called an outstanding relationship, presenting Burnham as a cooperative partner at a time when some other allies are more hesitant. By Trump's own account, The two leaders used that call to talk about North Sea oil, trade ties, the broader military alliance, and the tense situation around the Strait of Hormuz, signaling that energy security and maritime routes are central to their agenda. Burnham also invited the US president to Manchester for next year's G20 summit, a gesture aimed at reinforcing the importance of the transatlantic partnership and showcasing Britain as a key venue for high-level diplomacy. British media have reported that Washington specifically sought access to RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire and to the Diego Garcia base in the Indian Ocean, viewing these locations as crucial platforms for operations linked to the Iran conflict. One US official has suggested that Trump is frustrated with other NATO allies over restrictions on basing and overflight, saying he is disappointed by those who are reluctant to open their facilities for the campaign. Starmer, when he was in office, initially rejected a US request to use the Diego Garcia base for strikes on Iran, signaling a reluctance to let Britain be drawn too deeply into Washington's offensive campaign at that early stage. That decision angered Trump, who later said he was very disappointed with Starmer's stance, using public remarks to vent his frustration over what he saw as a lack of support from a key ally. The UK government later shifted course and allowed American aircraft to operate from RAF Fairford, giving the US a practical launchpad on British soil for missions that London described as limited and defensive. Since then, RAF Fairford has become a focal point for anti-war protests, with demonstrators treating the base as a symbol of Britain's involvement in the Iran conflict and gathering outside its gates to demand an end to US bombing runs.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest newsmakers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the US will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Have you ever wondered what happens when a banking dynasty meets tides of world history, intrigue, and a dash of myth?
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HT videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.